So I'm Ken Greene from Mimecast. I head up Mimecast's technical consulting professional services team. And it's great to know that not only am I between you and lunch, but I'm between you and a good lunch. So I might even try and finish 1 minute early for you, but let's see. So for those of you that don't know about Mimecast or don't know what we do, just one slide really. It tells you a little bit about us so you can put some of that into context. We're a UK-based company, about 8 years old. And what we do is quite focused around unified email management, providing a convergence of email management functions as a SaaS-based service. We are 4,500 plus customers worldwide and 1 million end users using our service every day. Those numbers are growing very significantly, so we've picked up some nice awards around the growth from a business perspective. But also because we develop all of our own technology, we've picked up some nice awards from an innovation perspective as well. So nice people say nice things about us, but let's just leave that there for the moment. In terms of what I want to walk through today, briefly look at which services are early candidates for migrations to the cloud. I think you've probably seen this done a few times, but I've got my own little take on that, and we'll expand out about what we see that in terms of how that compares when we look at the new Mimecast survey, which we've just completed and got the results in for, which gives us a proof point to really see where are we versus the hype. So we can put things up on charts and say, these are obvious good candidates for cloud. Are they actually moving to the cloud? What's moving to the cloud now? What's going to be next? And we've got some interesting survey results to share there. Then following on to talk briefly about how to get to the cloud, some high-level concepts about the key important things to think about when you're looking at a migration plan, some of the requirements of not the end solution, not the technology, but the requirements of the actual migration process. What have you got to think about in terms of users, in terms of data security, and what are some of the generic approaches which you can take to set yourself up for success there if you choose to make that journey towards the cloud. Again, one slide on Mimecast capabilities, just so you can really understand and make sense of a video case study, short 4-minute video I'm going to show you, where we'll hear from the IT manager from Burkitt's, a UK top 100 law firm. They've recently used some of Mimecast technology to deliver their own migration plans. So which applications to move to the cloud? Well, as I think it was Forrester Research said fairly recently, that's the wrong question. You should be asking yourself, which new applications should you build in the cloud? And I can understand why they're saying that. You've got an application which it may be costing you more money than you'd like. It may not do everything you want it to do, but it must fundamentally at least work at some level. You're going to try and pick that up out of a corporate data center on a typical client-server type environment and move it to a completely different architecture with completely different characteristics. And a lot of customers are going to take the presumption or assume that during the migration, nothing has to change. In most customers, when you look at any transformation, there's a transition and then a transformation. The transition is put it on the new platform, but don't change anything. Everything's got to stay the same. When it's on the new platform, we'll then look at how to optimize, how to make advantage of new features, change things for the better. I'll be touching on how I think that's a principally flawed plan when looking at moving to the cloud in a moment. So whilst I agree with what they're saying there, in reality, there's very few greenfield opportunities out there when looking at applications. So there are some businesses that are building their own applications, completely new functionalities, and some of them have decided they've got a technical preferred spec and delivery method for that, which is cloud. However, what's driving most customers to look at migration to the cloud, should they and how should they? It's the refresh, the scalability, reliability, and the cost concerns of their existing applications, which their business have got in place today, which they depend on, and that's what's driving the issue of whether to look at the cloud or not. So let's just park the new application development piece and look at existing applications. So we can characterize applications. We can characterize them in terms of complexity along the bottom here. So how complex is this application? How many different interfaces has it got to different systems? From a technical, a service, and a user perspective, how is it complex? And also on the vertical axis, how unique is it? Per customer, is this customer using the application in the same way that everybody else does, or do they use this application in a very unique way that's been tailored to meet their requirements? And we can put some applications on here. And let's not worry about exactly where some of these are, but an obvious one, conferencing services down the bottom left here. We're saying that most customers make the same use of audio and video conferencing services as every other customer does. You dial the phone, you enter your PIN number, you talk to other people. It's not particularly technically complex. Sorry if I'm offending anybody that works for an audio conferencing company, and within that world I'm sure there's lots of complexities. It's also not particularly unique as well. There's only so many ways that you can join an audio conference with other participants. Right up in the top right-hand corner here, you might have a bank's written its own foreign exchange currency trading system. You might have a car manufacturing plant that's assembling dashboards for vehicles, just-in-time provisioning, manufacturing process control, where it's typically bonded to unique hardware. It's written specifically with software just for that one enterprise. Now, obviously, you can see miles apart, and in the middle, you've got a few of the common things. And email, where Mimecast are very interested, typically towards the bottom left of this chart. So when looking at cloud strategies for these existing applications, why not try and match the strategy to the characteristics of the application? So you can see that some things in the bottom left, clear candidates for full cloud and now. And that's why a lot of companies have cloud-based. You might not think of it as cloud-based, but it is. If you don't have the conferencing bridge in your data center, it's a cloud solution. Obviously, moving up and to the right, there's applications here which have some components which are very well suited for cloud and some which aren't. So the question is, can you separate those out, and can you follow maybe a hybrid model for some of those applications? And then obviously the easy one is up and to the right, it's not yet. It would be an unacceptable set of compromises and changes for the customer to implement cloud for some of those technologies, some of those applications now. Now the move, the trend, as we heard earlier, consumerization, etc., is down into the bottom left. A lot of businesses, through economic pressure, are looking at, why have we created this hideously complex beast? Why does it take me 4 hours to build a corporate build laptop when fundamentally the guy that just started work, he had access to email, voicemail, instant message, chat on his home PC, and the whole thing only cost him £400. Now I'm paying somebody to build a complex bespoke configuration of a laptop, and the hardware is irrelevant, it's the management cost which is significant. So they're saying, well, what can we do to make this look more like a consumer? Do we really need it to be as complex as it is? Do we need to use it in a different way to our competitors? And sometimes the answer will be yes. They've chosen very deliberately to have that as a unique advantage because it does something for their business. But a lot of the time, that's the way that companies are trying to save money, by trying to move their applications, reducing the complexity, and falling in line with how everyone else is using them. Because it gets you to that bottom left area where you can make massive advantages of huge cost savings and flexibility. Okay. Now, applications within applications. So we talk about applications as email, something the user uses, and to the user, it's typically Outlook today for the business user. However, within that application or that service, there's multiple different feature sets, technologies, today provided by different technology vendors and providers. So if we just take email as an example, down the bottom left, you've got antivirus and anti-spam. Does one customer use and need and require different antivirus and anti-spam services to another? Maybe around the very edges of the periphery, but essentially nobody wants viruses and nobody wants spam. So it's not implemented particularly uniquely for one customer versus another. Also, although it's complex in the nitty-gritty of it, effectively you're just stopping bad emails. So bits of email exist down the bottom left, but bits exist up and to the right. So as we move into new features that have not been implemented by all customers yet, like data leak prevention, preventing sensitive information leaving your organization, encryption policies, where it's fine to send some emails not encrypted, but depending on whether you're sending it to your outsourced payroll team, you're sending how much to pay people, national insurance numbers, that should be encrypted. If you're handling credit card payments, etc. So it gets more complex and more unique per customer. Archiving e-discovery, another example. Sometimes it's for storage limits, sometimes it's for compliance, industry compliance, or a self-established internal policy. And up and to the right are where you're getting into some of the business process integrations. So law firms that have document management systems that integrate with email, have billing applications that integrate into email. And this is where some of those services, which currently are mostly provided through Microsoft Exchange and things that integrate with that technology suite, are up and to the right. So it's all very well and fine to talk about an application, but often if you explode that out, there's multiple other examples or components of that. If we take corporate voice systems, so a while ago I was doing network transformation deals for taking over corporates' voice systems with forward-based cost savings based on the establishment of voice over IP and cloud-based voice over IP systems. Now, voice has got components which are right down in the bottom left, but it's also got components which are up in the top right. So if you again look at how people are wanting voice services to collaborate with email, with other applications, that is fairly complex. If you look at 0800 call center routing, a lot of customers have implemented cloud-based routing for that, where the call comes into a cloud-based solution where it looks at what's the country of the caller, what language are they likely to be speaking, what products are they asking for support on, which of my multiple call centers shall I route the call to. But when the call gets to that call center, the sophisticated and very customized rule sets, which are currently mostly implemented in good old-fashioned on-premise solutions. So applications within applications is the idea. And we're seeing customers try and group areas of functionality within a business application and look at potentially different delivery models, which is essentially the hybrid approach. So what's the reality? I think we all know what the hype around cloud is, and we've been talking about it for a while. We have commissioned a survey which was conducted in July of this year, results not yet published, and we spoke to 500 email IT decision makers across companies of all sizes in the UK, the US, and some in South Africa. And the upshot is it's an interesting time for email again. So email is interesting because virtually everybody is looking to change their email service in the next 2 years. So have you already, or are you planning to change your email service? 77% over 2 years are planning to. Within the next 12 months, 57%. There's never been a time where as many customers as this are looking to change their email systems, and there's some good reasons for it. A lot of customers are still on Exchange 2003. Believe it or not, it's true. They perhaps looked at 2007, some incremental benefits, but it wasn't huge. Exchange 2010 significantly moves the game forward, so they chose to skip that version. Their refresh has been delayed through economic circumstances maybe, but it's now getting absolutely critical. It's not supported. Things are becoming a serious issue in terms of operational stability and security. Now that Exchange 2010 and some of the cloud-based solutions have gained familiarity, people have trodden those paths, they're now looking at now is the time to embark on this migration. So what are they moving to? So quite surprisingly for a lot of people, I think, 62% of the people we spoke to are looking to implement Exchange 2010 on-premise. On-premise. 21% opting for a hosted Exchange service. And hosted distinct from cloud, so hosted being the same server, virtual real, at the other end of the internet pipe managed by somebody else, but not cloud. Another interesting point is you can see on the left here, this is over 12 months, this is over 24 months. You can see that the statistics, the figures, they don't really change. Also, if you look back at those that have refreshed their email recently in the last 12 months, 75% went for Exchange 2010. So previous 12 months, next 12 months, next 24 months, the picture doesn't seem to be really changing. Does that mean the customers have made up their minds? Because when we used to look at these stats, the further out you looked, the more likely they were to be considering cloud. Whereas this really shows that it seems to have settled on these percentages going forward. So we ask customers about why to upgrade, and cost is always something that is on the agenda, but it's here at only the third highest ranked priority. New functionality, new features, and not very sort of sexy reason, but we're upgrading our server estate. And that's perhaps interesting just to bear in mind that this doesn't always set out as a wonderful new strategic vision. It often starts with my hardware's end of life. I'm going to put 64-bit hardware in. I may as well take advantage of the new software, of course. So cost is there, but adoption of new features comes above that. And for email, the number one thing was users fed up of having email mailbox quotas, because they all use Gmail at home, and they don't understand the need for storage limits, and neither should they, to be honest. Concerns. What are your major concerns when doing this migration? So The primary concern was around data loss, but also downtime following on from that. So data loss because when looking to move to a new email platform, a customer is typically looking to take email from multiple different locations, existing Exchange servers, PST files that have sprawled across the network in an uncontrolled way because of those mailbox quotas, sometimes on-premise existing email archiving solutions. And when you're gathering all of that data from places where it hasn't been touched perhaps for a couple of years, you're going to find stuff you thought was there is not, stuff you thought you had 1 copy of, you've got 3 copies of, some of it is corrupt. How do you ensure that all of that data makes it over to the new environment? And the downtime, obviously, unplanned downtime is terrible, but planned downtime for an application like email with an often globally distributed set of workforces that work weekends and late into the evening, acceptance of downtime is really 0, even if it's planned now. So they were the major concerns that customers had, and I think they would hold true for just about any migration of a new of an enterprise application to the cloud or to a non-cloud-based solution. We then asked customers, what are you planning to do to mitigate against those risks, to avoid and to make you sleep at night, really? And this is interesting because the number one thing they came up with was archiving all their data before they move. Now, we also asked them about how do you perceive archiving all your data, and they said it's going to be complex, it's going to be costly, and it's going to be time-consuming. But we're still going to do it because we think it de-risks the migration, and we think it could actually speed up the actual migration. The whole thing might take a year, but we're now going to spend perhaps 6 months getting ready and a 6-month migration rather than a long, prolonged, drawn-out 12 months of migration where you've got coexistence of multiple systems. So working out of office hours, encrypting all data, some of the other things on there. A third said they were looking to use some form of cloud-based service to help in the migration and to reduce complexity. So although getting all this data into an archive is costly and time-consuming, they're looking to do it, which is interesting because it means they're not doing what a lot of customers would typically do, which is we're moving to a new solution over there. It's wonderful and shiny and new. Why would we spend money tidying up our existing environment with our existing systems? We just want to get there as soon as possible and then we'll sort things out. So in conclusion, virtually everybody is looking to upgrade the email in the next 2 years. Exchange 2010 on-premise and hosted, but not cloud, seems to be what everybody's looking at. And it's recognized as a major project with some risks, but customers have got ideas about how they're going to try and control and minimize those risks. And archiving all of their data, even if they're not already archiving, even if they don't have an existing archiving policy, was seen as a number one mechanism to reduce that risk. And some using cloud services to facilitate that process as well. So how do you approach a migration to the cloud or a hybrid solution? Most migrations require a high level of consistency. And the starting point for most customers, as I mentioned, is let's move to the new platform and then look at taking advantage of new bells and whistles, maybe looking to the user to say, well, look, we've moved now, we've got these new options, would you like to take advantage of them? Move and then change. Most things do require consistency. Data availability, security, compliance should all be maintained or increased when moving to a cloud solution in our experience and in my view. However, some things can change and user experience can be one of those. If it's a positive experience at the point of first use, then the end user will go for it. However, if you move to the new solution with all your old baggage and a lot of the old restraints and constraints and restrictions, then the user experience is going to be poor, and they'll always associate with the move to the new solution. So that whole concept of whether you move and then tidy up and then deliver new features versus whether you tidy up first and move to a fully transformed solution where all the heavy lifting has been done, so when the user first hits that new service, everything's there, is an interesting point, we think. So any migration, it's also an opportunity to dump legacy constraints. Why carry over all of your expectations and demands of an internally delivered system into a new cloud-based solution? There's typically very good reasons why in existing environments you've got very tight controls around patching levels, around vulnerability assessments and reporting, physical inspection and audit. However, moving to the cloud it's an opportunity to save money and time in doing that. Obviously, it's critical that you trust the provider, that you prove the trust and you inspect, you ask them some key questions about how they manage their information security management systems, etc. But don't put stipulations on the provider to necessarily allow you to do everything in exactly the same way when you move over, because that's going to result in either reduced flexibility for you or increased cost, because quite frankly it's going to be passed on by the new cloud provider. So also, some change is beneficial. A small change, ask yourself, we've always done it this way, but go back to the reasons of why. Used to be very good reasons why corporate change control and patch management was very tightly controlled 15 years ago when you were responsible for the hardware, the operating system, middleware, the applications, and they were all from different providers which didn't necessarily play nicely together. In the new world, that might not be the case. Getting control and reducing complexity prior to migration is a key message which we talk to our customers about. And the analogy I would use is you're moving house to a lovely new house, a new build. All the floors are sort of polished marble and wood, and all the walls are white. There's no doors. They always do that sneaky trick to make the rooms look bigger. And it looks brilliant. But if you move in, you throw down your old carpets and put your old tatty curtains up, and all your old junk goes into that room, it's going to look and feel a bit like your old house. Also, about a week later, you're going to look at it and go, oh, that's awful. We should have got rid of that before we moved. So applying that to corporate IT, if this analogy works, I hope it does, there's opportunities to optimize and tidy up your existing environment. And it feels a little bit counterintuitive to spend time fixing existing problems, but we believe by doing so, you stand a much better chance of that migration being a single step to something which is going to be your steady state moving forwards. If you don't change anything about the existing environment and moving your problems and all your long-established set ways of doing things which you know might not really be required, moving that to a new infrastructure means you're going to have to solve those problems ultimately, but you're doing so in a new infrastructure. It also means things like the end-user experience is going to be mixed. So we would say, look at tidying up your existing infrastructure, reducing the complexity. And another analogy is outsourcing providers that will come in and sort of take over your network and run it as is today, and then migrate you to a new solution in the future. You're really just paying somebody else to manage your mess for less there. Don't do that with your own services in terms of there's a reluctance, an understandable emotional human reluctance to invest and tidy up existing systems and think that you can just port everything to a new platform and all the problems will go away. Not necessarily the case, and some time and money invested in optimizing that existing infrastructure can actually de-risk the move and make the migration itself almost a non-event. Another key point is recognizing the differences between your current reality and the solution you're moving to. So a lot of the time, people will assume that everything they can currently do in their existing solution, they're able to do in the new solution. Now, the assumption, people talk about it does what it says on the tin. A lot of cloud-based solutions, they do exactly what it says on the tin, but you could almost translate that to be it does what it says on the tin, but nothing else. So we've seen customers, not always from a technical perspective, but often from a service management, a reporting perspective, realize that things they used to do when they could control everything, touch everything, are no longer available in the new solution. So don't assume everything works the same. If you don't know otherwise, assume it's not going to be there. But view that as an opportunity to change, because otherwise you're not fundamentally leveraging the economies of scale and the flexibility of true cloud. So acceptable compromise leads to reduction in cost and simplicity, which is what a lot of customers are trying to drive down towards that bottom left-hand corner. Plan for problems. So not want to be too pessimistic, but implement some continuity disaster recovery if not already in place. Existing disaster recovery and business continuity plans are often kind of hardwired to the existing solution. So you have plans which talk about people racking and stacking kit. Obviously in the new world, you should be sort of absolved from all responsibility there, but revisit that disaster recovery continuity plan and check, now that we've changed the fundamental delivery technology for some of your core applications, what does that mean? It should be good news, but you don't want to get to that disaster and people start pulling out work instructions for manual intervention when that's really no longer applicable. Okay. Just one slide in 1 minute in terms of Mimecast capabilities and migration as the key aspect of what we're looking to do here. This is really how most corporate email systems started off. However, added complexity and solutions came along from multiple different solutions and providers in response to malware, antivirus, anti-spam solutions came along, legal compliance, encryption rules and policies, the need to keep all your email maybe forever, maybe not keep your email beyond a certain point if you're in some certain consumer services and healthcare. And that led to a proliferation of numerous point solutions around email. Now, a lot of customers, obviously, they want this 100% available, or however many nines you decide is good for you. Classically, replicate all of that in a second DR site. Some have moved elements of this, so those things in the bottom left corner, like antivirus, anti-spam on the earlier chart, they've already gone to the cloud in a lot of customers' cases. But you're still left with a fragmented email management platform here. Now, what Mimecast do, and we're very happy to talk to you. We've got a stand just through the door out and to the right here. Happy to have lots of conversations with you about this. We effectively move everything except that mail server and deliver it as a cloud-based SaaS solution, sitting between the internet on your mail server. So you're dealing now with a much simpler infrastructure. Because we can import all of your existing mail from clients and servers into the cloud, you can also reduce storage. So these are obviously great things to do ahead of a migration, because now you're migration ready. The actual move to a new mail service, whether it's an on-premise 2010 solution, as 62% of the people think they're going to implement in the next 2 years, this is now not non-trivial, but it's a simple task. Build a new server with a minimal amount of storage on it. All of your policies, all of your historical email, the difficult heavy lifting stuff has already been done. We can route between the two sets of infrastructure, and policy and security and reporting, it's all consistent because it's already implemented in Mimecast. And we're working with customers now who are part of, or taking part in, a migration, and they're not quite sure where it's going to end, but they clearly see there's benefits in this being the first step, and maybe they'll stop here with Exchange 2010 on-premise, maybe they'll move to a hosted model, maybe they'll move to a true cloud model, maybe for subsets of users. So they're not having, a 5-10 year view around exactly what to do here, but they're getting the point that by reducing that complexity and giving you a point of control independent of your mail server, it frees up a lot of new options to suck it and see with different services, to move users back without any change in interface to the user, access to mail or policies and security, etc. So, I won't cover these points specifically because the video case that I'm about to show you has a customer of ours talking about these. But effectively, what this customer did was use Mimecast before the email migration. So the migration to the customer is when they start building new servers, start rolling out Outlook 2010, not 2003. But there's work that was done before there to make that migration much smoother, lower risk, and quicker. So, you now hear from
Burkitt's is a regional law firm based in East Anglia. They've been there their entire history. We now have 4 offices: Norwich, Cambridge, Chelmsford, and our home office in Ipswich. 400 staff, top 100 law firm this year, and typical areas of law, corporate, commercial, property, and very strong in agriculture and international shipping law. Email is nowadays the primary tool that lawyers use. So making email 100% available 100% of the time was one of those key factors. I was brought on board in January 2010, and at that point Burkitt's was using an outsourced IT company, and the whole infrastructure was somewhat dated and required upgrading. One of the big issues that we had was with email. Email was all local, all based on a single Exchange server on 2003. There was no archiving as such. Everybody's doing local PST files, and the whole system was grinding to a halt. the solution as proposed by the external company at the time was just put in a bigger server with more disks on it, which was a price tag that was just ludicrous. So our first stage was to deal with that, which Mimecast was the obvious choice. I'd worked with the people in Mimecast before, so I knew what I was getting, and we knew it was going to work. It was very much a no-brainer. The next logical step was to get into the Exchange 2010, Outlook 2010 environment. The preparation for that, from our point of view, was getting the historic data up to date in the Mimecast repository. Users don't like change, but if you give them a change where they see a benefit, they'll grab it. The migration, we didn't really have any concerns about loss of data or downtime because we'd already got all of the historic mail in place and all active mail was going through Mimecast already, so we knew there was no risk of data loss. The fear users had is, will I lose my email? With the Mimecast in place and having been in place for over a year before we did the migration, that was a non-issue. Users could use the portal, there was zero risk of email disruption. The other big plus from Burkitt's point of view was with the Outlook 2010 Mimecast plugin, giving the users the same folder view that they were used to in their old 2003 environment. And thus, training was a non-issue. They were seeing what they saw before, just under a different icon. Now that we're at pretty much at the end of the migration process from 2003 to 2010, one of the other benefits from us as an IT perspective is that the two 2003 servers have got about 1.6 terabyte of store attached to them. The new 2010 Exchange server, we're down to a few hundred meg having done the migration, so the storage that we've saved is tremendous, but it also means that the users' performance that they get on indexing and searching local emails is also far faster because the Exchange server hasn't got to troll through all this historic mail unnecessarily. If we'd considered how we have migrated from a 2003 environment to 2010 without Mimecast, we would have had to have brought in some other archiving solution. The risk to the users would have been far higher than I would have wanted to go anywhere near. The users' response times to their email that they really need, their stuff that's 6 months, 9 months old, is 10 times what it was before. And the users see that benefit, and they can still get to all their archive email, and it's just behind another folder where they were used to using the old Outlook 2003 folder structure. They can now click into the Mimecast plugin and the folder structure is the same. One of the successes in IT is if IT is not known about, it's because it's all working. Mimecast falls into that.
So just a couple of things I want to pull out there that were mentioned really. One was the key principle behind that migration was to decouple the actual migration from one server to another, it doesn't really matter what it was, from a lot of the heavy lifting, high-risk activity tasks around moving large volumes of data. So by doing that, the actual migration was almost a non-event. So that particular case study was migrating to a non-cloud-based solution, Exchange 2010 on-premise. However, they leveraged a hybrid approach with certain aspects of the application delivered through cloud as an initial way to reduce complexity on site, remove the need to move large volumes of data at the same time as changing the technology. So it's changing the engines, but not in mid-flight. And with that, thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch.